We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Sunday, about ready to start another week. It's the weekend, but we've had a few things popping as of late. Now, of course, Ed was on the show yesterday, and I thank him for coming on. He has some great insights. It's always great fun to do a show with Ed. It's like going home. As I said, I spent a number of years, 20 plus years, working with him on a radio station here in the Twin Cities. So it's kind of, like I say, second nature to work with him. We know exactly what the other is going to do, so it makes things run pretty smoothly. That said, I have to be honest, a lot of the listeners that have come on the show have been just as easy. It's worked out very well. So I'm very fortunate to have a number of potential guests on a regular basis and always be good guests. But like I say, I've known Ed a long time. I know where he's coming from. And I appreciate him coming on the show. But of course, at the time he was on, the big news hadn't broken as yet. And that big news, of course, was the jury in the E. Jean Carroll case awarded E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million. Now, if there was ever a time when Donald Trump shit his pants, it had to be then. I think it's being said that Donald Trump himself was surprised by how big this award was. Now, the first time around, they awarded her $5 million, and Donald Trump put that in escrow someplace as he's appealing that one. He was expecting maybe it'd go 10 or 12 million because that's what E. Jean Carroll's lawyer was asking for. But it ended up being 83.3. Now, why do you suppose that happened? I think most people you hear from can attribute that to one thing, and that is Donald Trump's fucking behavior. He acted like an asshole leading up to the case, the trial. He continued to defame E. Jean Carroll. During the court case, he acted up. He frustrated the judge. His lawyer did some stupid shit. So all of that contributed as to what the jury decided to award E. Jean Carroll. And I think one of the important things was one of the questions that E. Jean Carroll's lawyer asked prior to the trial. She said, "What is it going to take to shut this guy up?" I mean, they got $5 million out of him, and he kept talking. He was talking louder and longer than ever. So clearly, $5 million wasn't that number. Then, of course, E. Jean Carroll lawyer was looking for 10 to 12 million, and this time ramp it up a little bit. Maybe that helps. But after the jurors saw and heard what they saw out of Donald Trump and his lawyer, Alina Habba, they said, we're going to have to make a statement here. One of the problems, too, is Donald Trump loves bragging about how much money he has. We know it's probably bullshit, but that's what he says. So the amount that they decided on in this case had a lot to do with what Donald Trump claimed he had. So once again, Donald Trump fucks himself over by opening his mouth. But we did find something out. We did find out that what the number is to shut Donald Trump up. And that apparently is $83.3 million. Because you see, after this judgment came out, obviously he was upset and he went to Truth Social and he's ranting and raving. It's ridiculous. The judge is that. The lawyers for E. Jean Carroll is this. He ranted and raved on, and he's obviously very angry and very nervous, I would think, at this point. But the point of it is, if you look at all his posts, not one mention of E. Jean Carroll. Isn't that fucking ironic? Yeah, Donnie finally got the message. Shut the fuck up. I mean, if I was his lawyer, and I'm not a lawyer, but it would be easy for me to tell him, if there's anything I could advise you to do is just shut the fuck up. And clearly that's a tough thing for Donald Trump to do, and that's why he's in the trouble he's in. Now, this is kind of an amazing amount of money, $83 million. And a lot of people are coming to me, oh, he'll just file bankruptcy. Oh, he won't pay it. He'll get away with it somehow. But here's what you have to understand about this. $83 million is a lot of money. And I will just give you a heads up. I've got a bunch of emails to go through. We'll do that, and we'll probably talk more about this too. There's other information tied to it. But Donald Trump can't get out of this very easily. As I said, he was fined $5 million in the first case. He literally had to put up $5 million in escrow so he could appeal it. Now, in this case, the same thing would hold true. If he wants to appeal this case, first of all, he's going to have a good reason for it. And frankly, there are no good reasons. This had nothing to do with deciding whether or not he was liable. And that seems to be where the confusion was for Donald Trump. He kept trying to prove his innocence, but that's already been adjudicated. This was about how much money he should have to pay. But he has to have a good reason for the appeal. And if he does get an appeal, he isn't found innocent. He's still guilty. It's just a matter of whether they adjust how much he owes. And in order for him to do that, of course, he's going to have to put up a bond with regards to the $83 million. Now, how does he do that? And this is why I question whether or not he'll appeal it. I don't know if he's in a position to do that. First of all, he could take $83 million cash, just write a motherfucking check, put it in a bond. He's out the money until such time the appeal goes through, and he'll no doubt lose, but he'll just delay having to pay the money. But it still has to come out of his pocket. Now, there's potentially a bond. Now, here's how the bond works. It's kind of like getting a bond for bail. You can get a bond based on a percentage of what the bail is. So like if you needed a bail of $1 million, they'd make you pay 10%, and you'd have $100,000 to pay. And then when you showed up and the bail was returned, the bail bondsman got the $1 million back, and also the 100,000 that you put in. That you'll never get back. That's payment to the bail bondsman. Now, in these cases, with this type of situations, it's not uncommon for the bond to be 20%, maybe even higher. So let's just say he's at 83 million, and they need 20%. That's 16 million up front. However, he has to put up some kind of collateral against the remaining amount, property or something. So this is not going to be an easy task for Donald Trump. He's not coming out of this looking like a champ. It's just not going to happen. This is a devastating decision, as I told you. And within a few days, we're going to get the decision from Judge Engeron in the Letitia James fraud case. And there we're talking $400 million against him. Think about that. If he gets 420 against him in the Letitia James case, and he's got 88 here, we're over $500 million. And I'll guarantee you, Donald Trump not only doesn't have $500 million in cash, but he probably doesn't have enough equity in his properties to amount to $500 million. People say, how could that be? He owns Trump Tower, he owns Mar-a-Lago, he owns all this shit. Well, yeah, he does. But we know how Donald Trump does business, and he leverages everything he has. So, if he's got Mar-a-Lago and say it's worth $50 million, that's fine. But if it's financed or remortgaged up to 40 million, that means he only has 10 million in actual equity. And that's all they'll use to pay back or cover this verdict. Donald Trump is truly fucked. He's fucked now at just 85 million or 88 million. But when that Letitia James case comes, he's done. Everything's gone. And as I've said before, everything that Donald Trump owns is in a receivership now. And because it's in a receivership, he doesn't get to sell this stuff. The receiver does that. And they don't have to play the games or hold out for the best prices like Donald Trump might. It's a matter of just fire selling this shit, getting it out the door so they can get money to recoup whatever is owed by Donald Trump. Not a good position for Donald Trump. The threat of an appeal, not a big threat, because it's still going to fuck him up until the time that he gets the appeal to go through. This is all bad news for Donald Trump. Very bad news for Donald Trump. All right. What we're going to do is look at some emails here. This one comes from Gussie. Says, "Hi, Boomer. On Thursday, I watched you and Old Soul discuss how MLK and blacks fought back with no hope. I understand 100% what you meant. I appreciate your admiration for Dr. King. My only pushback is that we have always retained hope. Hope is in our DNA. Perseverance is in our DNA. Our perseverance does not acquiesce. I believe this is where the fear of black people comes from. When you throw out when you throw all that at you, you have people and still they rise, ready to continue the fight. Hope can be terrifying." Gussie. Well, who you telling? I'm all about hope. And Gussie, I want you to understand, I didn't suggest that people of color or black people were hopeless or without hope. I just said they were up against insurmountable odds or seemingly insurmountable odds. The fact that they had hope is what gave them the reason to push back, and they did, and they made up some ground. Don't mistake whatever I say as somehow dismissing or discrediting people of color. I have a lot of admiration for all that they've gone through and all that they've done to come as far as they have. If white people of today in this country had that kind of resolve and that kind of confidence and hope, we wouldn't even be dealing with Donald Trump right now. So don't don't suggest I'm saying anything negative about people of color. I'm not. I just admire how somebody walks into a situation. I'm trying to make a comparison actually. People of color in the 50s and 60s really had insurmountable odds against them. Still, they had the confidence and the hope to push forward, and they made up some ground. We've got a lot of room for improvement and progress, but they still did it and they continue to do it, and that is admirable. The comparison is here when I sit doing the TikToks or the podcast, every so often somebody will come to me and act as though Armageddon's on the way. Donald Trump's going to be the next president. There's nothing we could do about it. This is why I don't like hearing that, and this is why I get annoyed by it. These are people that are hopeless. In their minds, they think there's no hope. And that to me is a weakness. If you don't have hope or a drive to do something, then why bother? Go sit in a corner, curl up in the fetal position, and fucking cry yourself to sleep. That's what I get frustrated about with people in this current situation, especially with all we see. The fact that people of color did not do that. They fought on under incredible conditions, and they continue to fight on today. Some people might say, well, do you think you're an ally? I said, no, I'm not an ally. That would suggest I have something more than them. I support them because they're people and they deserve equality in every way. And it has nothing to do with the color of their skin. It's just an injustice how different people are treated, whether they be, LGBTQ or people of color. What I don't give a shit about that. They're people. And if people are being oppressed or treated badly, I have a fucking problem with that. All right. Let's move on. Reading headlines such as GOP senators seethe as Trump blows up delicate immigration compromise. Okay, we know what's going on. We're trying to put out some border plan in spite of the fact that the Republicans say that Joe Biden's doing nothing about it and the borders are wide open. There is a plan. There was a plan when Joe Biden stepped into office. There's now a plan in the Senate. It is bipartisan, but we're looking at the House of Representatives trying to shut it down. And why are they trying to shut it down? Because Donald Trump told them to. They cry and whine about the border, and they think we need it done immediately, and they're probably right. But when Donald Trump says, no, hold on that, because I don't want to give Joe Biden a win, that shows you the kind of people we're dealing with. Has nothing to do with helping this country or helping the people in it, has everything to do with politics and self-enrichment. Anyway, this emailer says, um, headline like that makes my blood boil. There has, to my knowledge, never been a former president who has interfered with policy making or legislation ever. Can you help me understand why anyone won't or can't tell him to stay out of things he's no longer included in or responsible for? I know the GOP is split, with some Republicans staying quiet and some who love what he's doing and are actively assisting him. Is there any way to put a stop to this? Judy, Crazy Cat Mom, Portland, Oregon. Well, there is a way to stop it. You know, if the people that were sympathetic to Donald Trump and the Republican Party just ignored him, that would be one way. Had Kevin McCarthy not gone down after Joe Biden's inauguration and re-embraced Donald Trump could have faded away like he was supposed to. But the Republican Party, not all of them, but most of them, felt like there was some value in keeping Donald Trump close. They felt like it would help them in fundraising. They felt like it would help them in their support and their votes. And so they embraced him, regardless of what kind of bullshit he said. Donald Trump should have no input or influence in what Congress does. And for most people, he doesn't. But there is a small faction of people, the MAGA crowd, the Trumplafucks, that give him sway. And therein lies the problem. Is there a way we can do this? Yeah, we can kick every fucking MAGA fuck out of the Congress. And we have to do that in 2024. So many of the problems we have right now can only be fixed one way. And that's when the Democrats take control of the House and the Senate and the White House. I'm sorry to tell you that, but as long as the Republicans are there and they want to obstruct and they want to play these fucking games, not much we can do until we vote them out. So when people tell me my vote doesn't count, I say, please, motherfucker, take a look at what's going on now. The fact that you didn't vote or you voted wrong is why we are in this trouble now. So there is things we can do, but it's on us. And it's time we step up and fucking do it. All right. Next email. Hello, Mike. Billy and I are riding the coast after work and listening to your podcast with Old Soul. This is Billy and Jamie up on the East Coast. We hear from them frequently. She goes on to say, while at a light, we heard some commotion that turned out to be a dude with a megaphone yelling shit. In his hand was a Trump 2024 sign. Of course, that wouldn't be a Democrat. Haha, I wanted to yell out my window at him. Oh, Billy is my boyfriend. LOL. Yeah, we know. When you read my emails, you say that Billy is my husband or my partner. Someday I would love to be his wife. Have a great night. We went to Cracker Barrel for dinner last night. It was great food, Jamie. All right, Billy, what's up? You hanging out with Jamie for a long time. You're not married yet? You haven't asked her to get married? What the hell's wrong with you? Clearly you're in love with her. Clearly you like her. Clearly you travel with her and spend time with her. The fuck? Get off the bench, motherfucker, and ask her to get married. You know she's ready to say yes. What the fuck more do you need? And Billy, if you think I'm fucking with you, it's because I am. I've been married 40 years. I'm still here. Don't be such a wuss about it. Get off your ass and do something. The reference to Cracker Barrel is something I mentioned because I had occasion to go to Cracker Barrel recently. Hadn't been there for a long time, and I forgot that the food was actually really good. Now I'm going to be going back there. All right, the next email. Hi, Mike. I really enjoyed your podcast with Old Soul today. I think you actually taped it Wednesday, and I listened to it today. Old Soul is always great on your show, and you two of you together make listening very enjoyable. Thank you. Yeah, I love doing a show with Old Soul. It's like doing it with Ed. It's so easy because all I have to do is shut my mouth, and they can fill up space with good information, smarter information than I can come up with. Okay. Next, she says, during the podcast, you mentioned that you had watched the Barbie movie and thought it wasn't very good. I ran across an article today that I wanted to share with you about the importance of the message in the movie. Julie. Okay, Julie, here's the thing. I'm not talking about the message of the movie. I understand the message of the movie, and the message is good. There's no question. I'm just talking about the entertainment value for me. I'm not saying it was a bad movie. I'm just saying it wasn't entertaining. I mean, it was all right. I didn't hate the movie. But as an entertainment value, it was a little, I don't know, what do they call it? Not over the top, a little campy. And I know it was intended to be campy, but that's not the kind of thing I like to watch. I remember, I remember back when my wife and I weren't man and wife at the time, and um, we went and saw a movie. What was it? Um, okay, yeah, I remember. My girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, said, "Let's go see the movie Polyester." Now, I'm not trying to compare these two movies, but I'm trying to give you a sense about what I mean about campy. Polyester was the weirdest movie I ever saw. It was a little surreal, and I'm just not into that shit. But we went and saw Polyester, and it was a weird movie. Divine was in it. I mean, it was funny. It's just not my thing, you know? And they had this thing in polyester, this new feature, and it was just a joke, but it was real, and it was smell-o-vision. So when you went in and watched this movie, every so often something would come up that would offer a smell. It'd be a flower or bananas or whatever, and you had this little card and you'd scrape off of it. And when the star came up or something came up and there was a rose, you'd smell it and it smelled like a rose. Well, you went through this whole card, and toward the end, one of the characters passes gas, and and they put up a sign that you can get it on the smell card. And sat and watched people all around the theater scratching that last one off and smelling it and going, "Oh, gross." I don't know, man. For me, I didn't need to scratch it off. I knew I wasn't going to like that shit, and I didn't. I kind of digress here and I kind of go off on a tangent. Truly, I didn't hate the show in the sense that I don't appreciate the message. I do appreciate the message. I'm just saying you pay your 12 bucks and you want to be entertained. I just didn't find it that entertaining, but that's not me. That's me. My wife probably, well, I know she found it more entertaining than I did. It's just my weird fucking taste. But I understand the message and I stand behind the message too, and I agree with it. All right, next email. Hi, Mike. I've been catching up on the drama surrounding the Supreme Court decision on the razor wire. Personally, I think Joe Biden is more than generous in his giving Greg Abbott any time to remove the razor wire after Abbott said he was going to defy the Supreme Court. I've been hearing that, ironically enough, that one of Joe Biden's options is to invoke the Insurrection Act that Dirty Diaper Donnie wants to use to get revenge on everyone and nationalize the Texas National Guard. Personally, I think Joe should do it. Could Abbott face any criminal charges from this? I'm not surprised this comes from a party of law and order. Yeah, that's a mess down there. It goes on. There are two more stupid things coming out of the Iowa Republican government here. The first is a bill that would require all schools to sing the national anthem daily. I love this country, but come on. We have better things to have our students do than sing the national anthem every day. The other is a bill proposed by Secretary of State that would basically say that the only challenges that can be brought about ballot eligibility in Iowa are about citizenship, age, and basically makes it impossible to bring a 14th Amendment suit in Iowa. It also would put complete trust in the political parties to only nominate candidates who are eligible. I'm so sick of living in this red state. Hopefully, there are still enough blue voters left so we can turn this fucking backwards ass state purple this year and farther blue in the coming elections. Eric. And of course, Eric's been on the show a number of times. He's our Iowa correspondent, so to speak. And as far as Greg Abbott and 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 the border, I understand. I'm getting frustrated myself. The Supreme Court, all these Republicans talk about rule of law, and the Supreme Court says now you got to take the razor wire down. And Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, says, well, we can just ignore that. Okay, cool. As long as we know the rules, you can just ignore that. Does that mean we can ignore your attempt to overturn Roe v. Wade? That whole thing doesn't count for anything, or some of the laws that you jammed through in the Supreme Court regarding guns? Can we disregard all those? I mean, if we can disregard one thing that the Supreme Court says, we should be able to disregard all things that the Supreme Court says. And if we disregard all things from the Supreme Court, then what's the point of having a Supreme Court? Just fire all the motherfuckers and flush them out. And then when the Democrats get power, we can reform a Supreme Court that is worth a shit. Because right now, the Supreme Court isn't worth a shit. And the Republicans who support the Supreme Court because they've got the majority um, decide to ignore it when they don't get the answers they want. If they're allowed to do that, then there is no point to have a Supreme Court. All right. Next one says, "Hi, Mike. It's been a while, and I know you have wondered where I've been. Yes, I have. Anyway, my frustration comes from the Democrats. Over and over, the Republicans generate this message saying our economy is in the shitter when it's not. The border is a disaster, et cetera, et cetera. Dems need to start spreading the truth, telling folks the good things that Biden has done and roadblocks the Republicans have done. Every time an untruth is spoken, somebody needs to be there to nix that message. Remember Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go higher? I think it should be we fire back. Don't disagree. I really think that Trump-lefucks really have no clue the good things that Biden has done for them. They're sold on info they want to believe instead of taking info they need to know. Thanks for all you do, Jeff from Ohio. Well, thank you, Jeff. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the Democrats are starting to message a little harder, more along the lines of what they should be doing. And I think this will continue to ramp up over the next 10 months leading up to the election. I thought it was pretty interesting what Joe Biden did. You know, he wants to get this bipartisan border bill passed. And of course, the Republicans don't want to pass it, mainly because they don't want to give Joe Biden a win. Funny thing about it is they call him Sleepy Joe. He can't finish a sentence. He doesn't know where he is or what he's doing half the time. Funny thing about that is how is it then that Joe Biden always plays these dumb motherfucker, make them look like fools? And he did that yesterday. He said, look, if you pass this bill, then I would have the authority to shut down the border in emergency situations. Since we're currently in an emergency situation, the moment you sign that bill, I'll shut down the border, giving the Republicans exactly what they want. Now, the Republicans are almost shitting themselves. Go, what did he say? He said he'd shut down the border? Oh, no, we can't have that. That would make Joe look good. I mean, it'd give us what we want, but it would make Joe Biden look good. Remember what I said the other day on the podcast? I said they're complaining about the border plan now that's in the Senate. I said that if Joe Biden gave them everything they wanted, they would still turn it down. Here you go. Joe said, I'll shut down the border. All you have to do is sign the bill. I bet you they fight like hell to not sign the bill. It's going to end up going to the House probably next week, I'm guessing. And if it does, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. The important part of this is, though, that the messaging that Jeff was talking about. We've talked about the border bill being in place in spite of the fact they say that Joe Biden won't do anything. They say, well, that's well and good, but he needs to shut down the border. So Joe says, okay, we'll shut down the border. Now, the question is, how are the Republicans going to message this? Biden's given them exactly what they want. They can't say Joe Biden's not doing anything on the border because it's in the public purview. People are hearing about this. Joe has a budget or has a bill, and he's going to shut down the border. Now, what's holding back the Republicans? This is the one thing that's going to bite them in the ass. It really is, because they can't explain this away. They'll be exposed to everybody, including the MAGA fucks, as that they're just trying to be obstructionist and they don't care what's happening at the border. See, now Joe has put them in a position of saying, okay, let's do something about the border. They've been whining about it all this time. Now, Joe has taken most of the hurdles out of the way. Now, when they say no, guess who it's on? Not on Joe Biden, it's on the Republicans. And that's what I'm saying about Joe. Joe may be old, he might be doddering, but he's the most experienced politician we have in this country right now. And every time he sits down with Kevin McCarthy, Mike Johnson, or these Trumplafucks, he plays them every time. He may not be the typical young, virile guy like Gavin Newsom, but he's a wily old motherfucker. And he's the right guy at this moment in time. All right. We'll take a quick break. We have more emails to talk about, but we'll be right back. All right, we are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. A lot of emails today. We're actually talking about some of the top stories within the email, so we'll see how this all shakes out. This next one comes to us from Gary. He's a regular contributor with emails. He says, I have not written in a while, but am still a daily consumer and peer of your podcast. Thank you, Gary. I heard from a MAGA supporter, Tom, in Texas, that Biden is getting ready to resign and Michelle Obama will take his place as the Democratic candidate for the 2024 election. I Googled this and found that the New York Post columnist Cindy Adams is promoting this rumor. Have you heard the newest twist by the MAGA mudslingers? Thanks again, Mike, for your daily dose of sanity. The oldest boomer, Gary. Yeah, I've heard about this. Consider the source. The New York Post and Cindy Adams, a gossip columnist who's been around for a billion years. Do I think it's true? No. I mean, this is something they've been talking about for 3 years since Joe Biden's got into office. Oh, Michelle Obama's going to take over. Now, there was one thing that was said that is kind of interesting. We know that Joe Biden decided to run for the presidency or reelection anyway, um, because he felt like Donald Trump was going to be the nominee and that he was the one to beat Donald Trump since he beat him the first time. And I understand that and I appreciate that from Joe Biden. But that would suggest that if Donald Trump had not decided to run, that he may not have went for reelection. Okay, cool. That's not surprising, to be perfectly honest with you. I personally thought when Joe Biden took office, he would only do one term. But then when Donald Trump threw this hitch into the bullshit uh, with reelection running a second time, I can understand why Joe Biden would stay in the race. But that said, I've also been talking about the fact that I don't think that Donald Trump will be the nominee. I think he'll be buried in the insurmountable bullshit that's going on around him and on top of him, beginning with the $83 million that was awarded to E. Jean Carroll. This is taking its toll. This is not going to be good for Donald Trump. And I just don't know how he survives these lawsuits and the criminal trials coming up. That said, somebody is suggesting, well, if Donald Trump does drop out of the race, maybe Joe Biden will drop out of the race because Donald Trump did and somebody else will take over. Frankly, I don't think that's true. I mean, if we're this far along and we've got a campaign going on, why would you stop in midstream and change horses? You wouldn't do that unless you had to. Should something happen to Joe Biden and he can't continue, well, then, yeah, maybe. Secondly, if they did that, would it be Michelle Obama? And I don't think so. I mean, Michelle Obama is the gossipy thing to say, but Michelle Obama said she doesn't want to ever run for president. She hasn't really been in the news other than supporting Joe Biden at this point. If something should happen to um, Joe Biden, I would think that either Kamala Harris would step up and be the presidential candidate, maybe Gavin Newsom, I don't think Michelle Obama, not that I don't think Michelle Obama would be a good president. I think she would. She's a very smart woman. It's, her qualifications aren't just that she was the first lady. The qualifications are her law degree, her intelligence, her articulateness. Um, she would be a good choice, and she would certainly be a better choice than Donald Trump. Whether she will run or there's any plan to switch her with Joe Biden, I just don't think that's true. We hear a lot of bullshit every day, and it's people with hopeful thinking. I know there's a lot of people that would love to see Michelle Obama run, and I could be among them. I would vote for Michelle Obama, but again, why get this deep into the campaign and not stick with Joe Biden unless we have no choice? I see that as bullshit, and I think Gary, you're in agreement with me here. This is just more Republican um, rhetoric, more Republican messaging. I mean, they do this shit all the time. Oh, Joe Biden's getting money from Hunter Biden, but there's no evidence. All this shit is being thrown out there constantly. It's like the Republican Party is a Russian troll farm. They're constantly throwing misinformation, trying to mislead and carry the narrative. So when you hear shit like this, you got to keep that in mind. That should be the first and foremost thing you believe is going on, as opposed to any truth to what they're saying. All right, the next email comes from Craig. He says 80 million. That's what that orange fuckboy has to pay E. Jean Carroll. 83.3 actually, plus another 5 million, so it's 88.3. This broke motherfucker ain't winning shit in 2024. This news has me so looking forward to the podcast tomorrow. Thanks, Boomer. You're the best, Craig. I agree with you. Donald Trump cannot win the presidency in 2024. There's just nothing that shows me he has even a chance. People will say, I'm afraid he's going to win. Well, based on what? What evidence do you have that tells you that Donald Trump could win in 2024? I mean, short of the bullshit polls, but we know how well polls do. The polls told us that Donald Trump would win New Hampshire over Nikki Haley by 30%. It was 10. So I agree with you. And the $80 million, $83 million that he is losing to E. Jean Carroll is just the start of the landslide. This is when things start to bury Donald Trump, and he's in fucking trouble right now. You can see it when he's talking. We know he's losing it a bit. He's slipping um, every time he talks, and it's going to get worse. It's steadily going to get worse, and it's going to get worse quick because he's not of a sound mind or body, and he's got a lot of pressure on his shit. And every time he turns around, he loses, which is foreign territory for Donald Trump. He's used to either winning or forcing people to give him the win because he's a bully or he has too much money. Well, he's in the wrong arena now because he doesn't have the most money and he doesn't have the most power. He's still trying to behave that way, but it's just not the case. All right. Next email comes from Don. He says, I know you have addressed this before, but please help me understand what happens next. I'm not surprised the jury awarded a large amount as Trump and attorney alienated themselves and pissed off the judge and jury, but Trump doesn't have 83.3 million and wouldn't pay it if he did. Thanks, Don. Well, he probably doesn't have the 83.3 million. There's a couple things he could do. He could go get a loan, have somebody loan him the money and put it up. That ain't going to happen. Nobody's giving Donald Trump a loan. If he doesn't have the money, then they start seizing properties. That's what they do. If you owe that money, this is what's going to happen to Rudy Giuliani with his $146 million loss to those two women in Georgia. They're going to start seizing property. Now, the problem with that for Donald Trump is he's not going to be able to call his real estate agent and sell his shit. He's got a receiver. He's in receivership. So the receiver's going to find out, okay, he owes this much money. What do we have to do to get it back? And there's no emotions in it for a receiver. They're just there to do the job. Again, like I said before, it's well and good that he may have a $50 million building or an $80 million Mar-a-Lago or whatever, but how much of it is leverage? Donnie loves credit. And let's say Mar-a-Lago is $60 million. Okay. But what if he has a mortgage on it of $40 million? So that $60 million is really only $20 million. And they're going to take it, they're going to scoop it up, um, sell it, and try to satisfy the monies he owes. But because he has little equity in most of his properties, he's going to have to sell a lot of his properties. So that's what's going to happen. He's not going to be able to sit back and say, oh, I can't afford it. Well, they'll find a way for you to afford it. Not only will they take your properties and seize your properties, but anything you make henceforth, they will be dipping in on that. So say he wants to grift his people for another 20 million. They're going to grab that. So Donald Trump's not in a good position. And whether E. Jean Carroll gets a full 83 million or not, I doubt that. But but they're going to get all that he has. And that to me is all that's important. Nobody expects E. Jean Carroll to get the $83 million. I really don't believe that's possible. But if she gets 20 million and it's all he has, I'm sure she's going to be happy. I mean, this woman's 80 years old. What's she going to do with $30 million? Plus, she has a few bucks. She's fine. She's trying to make a point. The point of this lawsuit wasn't the money. The point of it is to shut Donald Trump up. And with this 83.3, apparently she's accomplished that. All right. The next email says, hi, Mike. Jesus Christ, the last few days have been interesting, and it is only going to get worse for Trump and the Republicans. E. Jean Carroll won $83.3 million in damages, though Donnie said he'd appeal all the way to the Supreme Court if he had to. And he certainly can try to do that, but he better come up with some cash for that fucking bond. And he better have a good reason why he needs to appeal it. And he has neither. Um, funny enough, he's still appealing the previous case, but the entire $5.5 million verdict in that case is held in an account with the court, and she'll get his money when his appeal runs out. I'm guessing he'll have to do the same thing with this amount as well. How long until H3 defames her again? He defames her again. I'm honestly surprised he hasn't yet. Well, as I was saying, he's been ranting and raving about that court case and about that award. Funny thing is, he hasn't said fuck all about E. Jean Carroll. Maybe, maybe he's learned a lesson. To be perfectly honest with you, E. Jean Carroll's lawyers have every opportunity to file another lawsuit because between the first and the second lawsuit, he defamed her again and again and again. So don't be surprised if E. Jean Carroll's lawyers come out with yet another lawsuit, just for posterity's sake. Email goes on. I haven't heard that Joe Biden has done anything about Abbott's refusing to follow the Supreme Court's decision. However, there is supposedly a deal to fund the imaginary border crisis. Yet the obstructionist Republicans in the House want to block it. Can't give Joe a win because Trump wouldn't have anything to campaign on. Guess that means Joe's doing a great job. Almost sounds like Republicans are endorsing the job Joe is doing. These fucks cannot be bothered. To pass this bipartisan bill on the border that was negotiated for months, wish I could not do my job but still get paid. Yet the House wants to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas over not handling the crisis at the border. You can't make this shit up. Eric. This is Eric from Iowa again. And you're absolutely right. This is how it's all going down. They've got a plan, even though they say Joe Biden doesn't have a plan. It's bipartisan. Joe Biden's offered to shut the border down, but so what are the Republicans going to do? They've kind of painted themselves in a corner, and we'll see how they come out of it. But the fact of the matter is that they typically just double down, triple down, quadruple down, and they don't fucking care. They don't care how stupid they look. So I expect they'll continue to quadruple down and not give Joe Biden a win. Unfortunately, your red states on the border, well, there's actually only one red state on the border, um, a red state, and that is Texas. Funny thing about it is these claims and these fears about the border in Texas are one thing, but you don't hear California, New Mexico, or Arizona crying about it. Isn't that weird? Really strange. Texas is the only border where they're having problems. I find that hard to believe. All right, next one. This is the last email, and it comes from Steve. I've talked about having Steve on the show, and as I've said, that's opened up to anybody who wants to be on the show. Just email me, rationalboomer@gmail.com. Tell me when you want to come on. We'll try to set something up and get you on the show. Anyway, Steve was talking to me about uh, a primary restructuring proposal. He says, I call it the first three states primary model. And he sent me the information. I'm going to read it to you here and we'll see what we think of it. I haven't read it completely yet. So this will be interesting. All right. It goes this way. States would compete to win the privilege of being one of first three states to hold presidential primary party elections every 4 years. The first three presidential party primary elections would be held in states that last elected a candidate from their party who went on to win the national presidential election, or selected the winning candidate by the widest percentage margin. The biggest margin, states would vote first, then in margin order, highest to lowest. Advantages of the first three state primary model. It would start off the presidential primaries with an energizing competitiveness that would give any party that implements it a better chance of selecting candidates who would have the broadcast or broadest national appeal and would incentivize winning states to keep picking the most appealing national candidates in order to retain their first three states primary status. Candidates wouldn't be required to curry the favor of the most extreme fringe elements of their parties early on, which can ultimately harm a candidate's chances for broader national appeal later on. It would reward states that have made the most or best predictions by allowing them to vote on the full range of candidates instead of a later winnowed down list. It would give states that may have never had the chance to influence an election the opportunity to finally have their voices heard based on the accuracy and wisdom of their choices. It would serve as a democratic equalizer, as no state would have an inherent advantage, regardless of its size or location, in being selected as one of the first three states. All states would have an equal opportunity to be selected with every new election cycle. The first three states' primary model could be adopted by one or both parties, but if it's only one, that party would have an advantage in picking a winning national candidate, which would ultimately influence both parties to join the first three states model. This would result in better and more representative candidates from each party. Now, no first three states primary consideration would be given to states that selected a candidate who went on to win the national party primary election, but who later failed to win the national presidential election because that state party ultimately selected a losing national candidate. This would reduce the chances of selecting candidates who don't have the necessary national appeal. States who win this first three states primary privilege would be required to fund standardized, well-regulated, nonpartisan websites in order to get each candidate's message out in an even-handed way that allows the little guys and the underdogs to get their platforms heard on equal footing. This would afford them a fairer chance against better funded candidates, regardless of the size of the state. Candidates' positions and statements read by the candidates themselves would be disseminated on the website and free downloadable audiobooks, YouTube videos, and various social media sites. The three Democratic and Republican primaries would most likely be held in different states based on their individual first three states' rankings. First three states' voting date order would be first, second, and third, would be subject to change every year, keeping the primaries interesting, unpredictable, and dynamic. Thanks for taking time to read and consider this idea, Mike. Steve. Well, Steve, I think it's not a bad idea. I think it's a little complex to expect politicians to even look at it. Uh, maybe when the Democrats take control, they would consider something like this. But in terms of the primary process, it does need to be a little refined. It's a little archaic at this point, and I don't know that it really does as much good as people think. What Steve is suggesting here isn't a bad idea, but remember, another good idea is term limits for members of Congress. The only problem with that is the people that would decide to implement term limits are the people that are the ones that are affected by it, Congress. Do you really think Republicans would go with this idea? It's not about what works or what's good or what's fair. It's about what they can gain to get the advantage, especially with the Republicans. But don't discount the Democrats. They would too. So I think it's a good idea. I think it's workable. You obviously gave it a lot of thought and you've covered all the bases. So it would probably work very well. And that might be the very reason why our politicians would have no interest in it. They don't seem to care about doing things properly. They only care about doing things that benefit them. And therein lies the problem with our politicians and our government. This is just one of the many things we have to change. You can have the primary process refined like you're suggesting, Steve, but then shouldn't we get rid of the Electoral College altogether? Absolutely, we should get rid of it. It doesn't make any sense. Why would a loser of a popular vote end up winning the presidency? That makes no fucking sense. All right. Thanks for the emails again, Steve. Thank you. Very thoughtful email, and you make some great points, and I don't disagree with you. I think a lot of folks listening might say, hey, that's not a bad idea. There's a lot of good ideas out there. It's just a matter of getting our politicians to accept them, and we haven't had much luck with that. All right. Now, regarding the big news of yesterday, the $83 million that E. Jean Carroll took off of Donald Trump. Now, Trump was likely not very happy when he heard the jury found that he owed E. Jean Carroll $83 million, and that's according to a former Trump administration official. Former White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham appeared on MSNBC's Alex Witt Reports on Saturday and was asked about how she thought ex-president would have responded to the massive damages award. She was asked, how do you think Trump reacted to the jury award behind the scenes, the host asked. And what do you think is happening in his immediate orbit right now on this? Grisham said, I actually thought immediately I would not want to be anywhere near him when the verdict came in or the award came in for E. Jean Carroll, Grisham said. I can't imagine how angry he was. I can imagine. I would have loved to have been there. Grisham added that she was lighthearted about the development, joking that we should keep the ketchup away from him because he's known for throwing things. I think that's good advice. She went on to say, I would not want to be anywhere near him, adding that it was interesting how Trump lawyer Alina Habba went immediately to the press. I think she was performing for one man, Grisham said. She noted that while Trump will fundraise off this and pretend to be a victim, behind the scenes, there's no way that he's happy about this. Oh no, he's not motherfucking happy. Definitely not happy. Now, Roberta Kaplan, the attorney for E. Jean Carroll, claimed that Judge Lewis Kaplan will force former President Donald Trump to pay the full $83.3 million he owes to her client. Now, on Friday evening, New York ruled that Trump was liable for that amount in damages for defaming Carroll. Last May, a jury also found Trump liable for sexually assaulting Carroll in a department store back in the 1990s and awarded her $5 million in damages. The question of whether Carroll will ever see any of that money has been subject to a lot of speculation in the past couple of days. But Kaplan on Friday joined CNN's Anderson Cooper for an interview about the verdict and especially about the sum owed by Trump. Trump has vowed to appeal the ruling, but Kaplan doubted he would succeed, as I mentioned earlier. Cooper asked Kaplan if it's possible that Trump somehow avoids paying her client by declaring bankruptcy. So here's how the conversation went. Cooper said there have been plenty of cases where a jury awards a huge verdict and it gets knocked down later on. Do you anticipate E. Jean Carroll actually seeing this money? Kaplan says completely. She'll see this money. So the kinds of ratios that the courts gets concerned about are ratios over 6-1. Here we're well within the range. Cooper says 6-1 based on one person's income. And we know Donald Trump's income is huge because he said so. Kaplan said, based on compensatory damages, so here compensatory damages are 18 million. So 65 punitive with 18 million compensatory is not that big of a ratio. And I can't imagine the court having any problem with it. So what she's saying is if they awarded her $18 million and they said give her 200 million, they'd have problems with it. They'd knock it down. But 18 million is what, like only 4 or 5 times more than the 18 million. So it's well within the range of 1 to 6. Cooper went on to say, I mean, you also hear, that there's been plenty of defendants who have a big judgment against them and somehow finagle a way to declare bankruptcy or figure out a way not to pay. Do you think he's going to pay? Kaplan said, I think he's going to have to pay, and whether it requires him to sell something or put a lien on something to get a loan, that's his problem, not ours. He's going to pay, and Judge Kaplan, through judgments, enforced mechanisms that will make sure that he pays. And indeed, even to take the appeal, he's going to have to put up at least a bond of 20% of the amount and also have collateral for the remaining amount. So 20% of 18.3 is what, 16.6, $16 million, $16,600,000 in addition to the 5.5. So now we're at 21.8 that he's got to take out of his pocket and put someplace. He's got to get that money somehow. And bankruptcy isn't going to change anything. Bankruptcy, he can file bankruptcy for all his other shit, but not for this particular amount. All right. President Biden on Friday pressed Congress to embrace a bipartisan Senate deal to pair border enforcement measures with Ukraine aid, but House Speaker Mike Johnson suggested that the compromise on border and immigration policy could be dead on arrival. Well, of course they could. Again, it's bipartisan in the Senate. Why the Republicans in the House would have a problem with it, no one, well, we all know. It has nothing to do with the quality of the bill. It has everything to do with giving Joe Biden a win. I don't even know why it matters anymore. They have no chance of winning in 2024, so you might as well get some goodwill out of it. But they're too dumb to fucking even realize that. The Democratic president said in a statement late Friday that the policies proposed would be their toughest and fairest set of reforms to secure the border we've ever had in this country. He also pledged to use a new emergency authority to shut down the border as soon as he could sign it into law. Give them exactly what they want, but they still want to turn it down. Makes you wonder. It has to make the people on the border wonder, too. Are the Republicans really trying to help us? Clearly, they're not. Now, Biden's embrace of the deal and the Republican resistance could become an election year shift on the politics of immigration. He's right. If Joe Biden says, yeah, I'm going to do something, and the Republicans refuse it, then it's much like the whole shutting down the government thing. Shutting down the government would go down against the Republicans. And now, if we can't get a border deal done, it's going to go against the Republicans because Joe Biden said, I'm ready. Let's fucking do it. So once again, the Republicans fuck themselves. Joe Biden played these dumb sons of bitches. And now it's going to be interesting to see what they in fact do. Now, yet the diminishing prospects for passage in Congress may have far reaching consequences for U.S. allies around the globe, especially Ukraine. And that's part of the problem. In this bill would be funding for Ukraine. Now, the Republicans don't like the idea of funding Ukraine, but anybody with a normal intellectual level understands what that's about. We've got to shut down Vladimir Putin because once he goes through Ukraine, he'll be off to Poland. Then we got NATO involved and we got a big world war. I think it's wise to probably try to avoid that and push Russia back to where they fucking belong. Now, Senate Republicans had initially insisted that the border policy changes be included in Biden's $110 billion emergency request for funding for Ukraine, Israel immigration enforcement, and other national security needs. But the Senate deal faced collapse this week as it came under fire from Republicans, including Donald Trump. He's the one calling the shots. He eviscerated the deal as a political gift to Democrats. Well, I guarantee he hasn't even read the fucking deal. He just knows that it's going to make Joe Biden look good, and he doesn't want any part of that. Now, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House on Friday, sent a letter to colleagues that aligns him with hardline conservatives determined to sink the compromise. The Speaker said the legislation would have been dead on arrival in the House if leaked reports about it were true. See, that's the interesting thing. They're saying it's dead on arrival, but nobody's ever fucking seen it. Not yet, anyway. Now, a core group of senators negotiating the deal were hoping to release text early next week, but conservatives already say the measures do not go far enough to limit immigration. The proposal would enact tougher standards on migrants seeking the asylum, as well as deny asylum applications at the border if daily migrant encounters grow to numbers that are unmanageable for authorities. I mean, what more do you want Joe Biden to fucking do? Typical Republicans. And like everything else, this will bite them in the ass. We're going to wrap things up with a story. Donald Trump, of course, was on stage giving a rally in Nevada yesterday, and it was a doozy. If we were worried about his mental decline, it was spotlighted again in this particular speech. Donald Trump on Saturday said he was treated worse than Abraham Lincoln, prompting laughter from the audience at his rally in Nevada. Now, keep in mind, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. So, how Donald Trump thinks he's treated worse, I don't fucking know. It's silly. And even Republicans know it's silly. And beyond being silly, what does it matter? What's the point of it? Now, the former president delivered remarks to a Team Trump Nevada Commit to Caucus rally in Las Vegas, where he said he should be number one on the list of presidents who were treated the worst. He even specifically mentioned beating Abraham Lincoln for that top spot. Again, what's that got to do with you being president? You're trying to make excuses for the shit you brought on yourself. He goes on to say, people say, how do you do it, sir? I get two questions. If you had to do it again, would you do it? Because, in history, they say the president that was treated the worst was Abraham Lincoln, but he had the little Civil War. Yeah, the little Civil War. Trying to diminish the fucking Civil War. And he says, and Andrew Jackson was treated badly. Andrew Jackson, he was treated very badly, and a few others. However, Trump said he believes he now deserves to unseat the greats. So that means we should elect him president because he was so badly treated. I haven't seen the new list, but if I'm not number one over Abraham Lincoln, I will be very disappointed, he added to laughter from a pro-Trump audience. This moment prompted Democratic political strategist Simon Rosenberg to suggest that the audience was laughing at the ex-president and not enjoying his humor. People at the rally are laughing at Trump here, not with him, he wrote on Saturday. Yeah, a lot of people are laughing at Donald Trump. And the laughing is going to get louder and more continuous as the days go on. This was a very bad day for Donald Trump, but this is the best day he's going to have for the next 10 months to 10 years because every day it's going to get worse. Like I say, he's got this $83 million he owes E. Jean Carroll, 88 actually. He's not going to get out of it. He's going to have to fucking pay it. They're going to have to sell off properties if he can't afford it. But that's not even the worst of it because Judge Engeron said he would come up with a decision on an amount in Donald Trump's fraud trial, the lawsuit with Letitia James, by the end of January. Today is January 28th. There's 31 days in January. So in the next few days, he's going to get hit with another fine or disgorgement or whatever they want to call it. He's going to get hit with another one that's probably 3 to 5 times bigger than the one he just got that he's finding so devastating. When that one hits, it's pretty much over in terms of business and finances for Donald Trump. Everything he has is going to be wrapped up or sold off, and he is not going to be the wealthy billionaire that he tried to lead us to believe he was. It's going to go badly for him, and he is going to lose his shit. If he was surprised by the $83 million that he heard yesterday, you can't even imagine what's going to happen when Judge Engeron comes back with his verdict. That is going to be a death blow, the death knell of Donald Trump financially. And let's be honest, when it comes to Donald Trump, it's all about him. It's all about his money. It's all about his power and property. Take that all away. What do you got? You got a shell of a piece of shit, which is saying something. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.